Welcome to Coming In Hot. Thank you live from Airplay Beach for the intro music. We are recording live from the Darling New Media Studios in Midtown Sac. All right, everybody. Welcome back to the show. Today we have a very, very special guest. A Sacktown legends in the building, everybody. This lady that we're going to chat with today, she has her pulse on all parts of Sacramento, greater Sacramento, surrounding areas. We got Sonya Sorich in the building. What's up, Sonya?
Hey, what's up? Thank you so much for having me. We interviewed for business purposes last week for my upcoming story, and then this opportunity came about. So I'm very excited about it.
See, that's what I do now with the journalist. You know,
I
I
like
flip
that.
it now. I flip it. All right, I'm gonna do everything I can do, but you got to do something for me too.
I'll take it. Hey.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for being on here, and like you just said, we just had a couple days of meetings and few interviews, so we're gonna flip it this time. So,
all right.
and I think it's something that everybody pretty much knows your name. I don't know if they know the face to the name.
I know.
Is
Yeah.
that something that you get quite a bit?
Yeah, we do have we have these little headshots that accompany our stories online, but it's amazing. Whenever I meet somebody in person, there's always a comment of you look a lot better than your headshot, which I don't really know. I don't really know how to take that. Or you look much older in your headshot. I don't know if that's a compliment or not. It was funny because when I first moved back here to the Business Journal, I moved from Georgia to back to Sacramento. I was living in Georgia for a while, working for a newspaper there. Mm-hmm. And I drove across the country from Georgia to Sacramento. I did the whole trip in 3 days and I had to start working. I got home in a late night hour, had to start working the next day, and then they wanted to take my headshot as I was recovering from that whirlwind drive, still not completely even sure which time zone I was in. So I had that headshot. At some point we did replace that, and I thought it was an upgrade, but it's amazing. People always have some sort of comment on how my real life presence compares to the headshot that they see online.
That's I've never taken the drive, but my dad and my sister drove that because my sister's out in Georgia, and they drove it a couple times, and to get back in 3 days, that's a feat.
So, it was
congratulations.
Yes. Thank you. And if I get any other bonus points, I had a dog and a cat in the car with me too.
Yeah. We're gonna put a couple more points on there for you for that move. Hey, so let's take it all the way back. Are you from Sacramento, Sonya?
Yeah, I was actually born in Illinois, lived there for a very short amount of time, still have a lot of family out in the Midwest, but I was raised in the Sacramento area, grew up in El Dorado Hills, went to grade school, junior high here, went to high school at St. Francis, mm-hmm. And then I went to college. I went back to the Midwest and lived in Wisconsin for a while, came back here, then lived in the South, and then moved back to the Sacramento area about 7 years ago.
Oh, okay. So what made you come back? Because I'm one person that did the same thing. Not 7 years, but I moved to San Francisco for about 3 years. I went to culinary school, got chewed up, spit out, and I'm back in Sacramento now. So what made you, all right, so you're in Sacramento, you go to Georgia for the newspaper. Yeah. Why come back to Sac, and why the Sacramento Business Journal?
Yeah, so The reason why, basically my parents were still here, and you know, your perception of your family kind of evolves as you get older. It was important for me to be closer to my parents as they were getting older, and to be completely honest, my mom was dealing with cancer and was in the final stages of her life, and for me, I kind of put a priority on spending time with her, and being with my parents, and kind of put that ahead of any sort of additional personal preferences of where I wanted to be. And also, Sacramento isn't a bad place to move back to. You know, I had been away for a while, still had a lot of friends here though, and just sort of, again, it was primarily motivated by family and wanting to be here, to help my parents out. And fortunately, the Business Journal job kind of fell into place. It was interesting though, I was doing a type of writing, and you know, I've been involved in newspapers throughout my entire career, but I was doing a very different type of writing in Georgia. I was writing a lot about pop culture, a lot of American Idol coverage, a lot of live blogging about TV shows, reality TV. I kind of had a lifestyle and dating column for a while there. And so this job initially was a fairly dramatic shift from that. It was sort of the job that opened up and an opportunity that presented itself to me. And even though I thought my background was very different, the editor at the time saw qualities in me that he thought could translate into business coverage, and I've learned a lot. It's you know, it's hard to say that nobody has a background in writing about business, because business elements intersect with almost every type of journalism. And even if you're not directly covering something like a publicly traded company, or the stock market, or banking and finance, there likely is a business angle in virtually any story that you're covering.
Yeah. So the Business Journal, like, I know you guys are a chain throughout America.
Yeah.
And how many of these? You got 40 markets
Yeah,
nationwide.
we have a presence in more than 40 markets. And then also, through, you know, the pandemic, we really tried to, and I hope succeeded at, providing a service to our readers throughout the pandemic. Our readership actually skyrocketed last year as more people looked for information on things like navigating the PPP application process. And now that's sort of shifted to a lot of workforce issues. People are interested in seeing what various companies are doing in terms of remote work and return to physical offices. And then also issues that are affecting several industries, like the labor shortage that you and I talked about last week as I was working on my article. Right, there's been a lot of, so we cover very specific local issues, but also from our national desk, we do produce stories that affect markets nationwide, such as things like getting government assistance as your business navigates disruption from the PPP, and finding workers, and learning how to incentivize workers to sign on for jobs at your place of employment, those sort of things.
And what were some of the things? Because this is a question I get asked all day, every day. And I'm going to ask you, because I think you asked me, what did you guys do during the pandemic to, you know, stay strong? And I know you said, you know, you put some things out about the PPP and that kind of stuff, because the PPP and anything to do with these government, it's like reading a novel, you know. And
Right.
then you're trying to, what were some of the other things that you and the Business Journal did during this pandemic to, you know, kind of separate yourself from, you know, other other
Yeah.
news sites, or you know, kind of journal things?
Well, yeah,
What
I
were
think
those things?
that was a, that, you know, a big part of our mission was helping people navigate that confusion that you just talked about. You know, I think especially during the early stages of this, there was a lot of confusion among business owners, not only in terms of things like applying for the PPP, but also things like navigating the constantly evolving restrictions for different sectors of business. And a lot of times we were trying to provide those answers, but sometimes we were getting answers from people at the top that were just as fuzzy as what you were receiving.
Yeah.
So you know, I think that I remember for fitness studios in particular, I wrote a story saying that small fitness studios in Sacramento County could reopen with various restrictions in place, and then merely hours later, it seemed that that changed, and no, nobody could reopen. So it was just kind of staying on top of these things and trying to give people the most current guidance. And I hope that we succeeded at that. You know, there were many times when readers would contact me saying that they heard of an updated policy or restriction change through the Business Journal before they received the actual notice from the officials who were supposed to be telling them what to do. So I think that was part of our mission. And then, you know, back to the PPP, there were a lot of examples, particularly early on, with individuals who were trying to get some sort of assistance, whether it be monetary assistance or help just in marketing their business and letting people know that they were still open. And we tried to tell those stories, and in turn, a lot of those people connected with the resources that they needed to sustain a customer base during these difficult times. I think telling those stories and also giving people ideas of ways that their business could adapt. I know, and the story that I interviewed you for is part of the series that we've been doing called Resilient Sacramento, which is kind of telling the stories of how different businesses weathered through the pandemic and dealt with the disruption. And my first story I did was about an indoor cycling studio that ultimately set up a tent outside and move their operations to the top of a parking structure. And so it's just sort of telling those stories and connecting people with, at the very least, ideas of how to adapt to this disruption. And then, you know, on a bigger level, connecting them with influential people within the community who might be able to help them navigate things like grant programs and that sort of thing. Because it's amazing, you know, we write about this stuff so much that we assume that everybody knows about all of the grants that are out there for small businesses and all the different programs that are available. But in reality, a lot of these businesses are just trying to keep their doors open. They don't have time to play around on the internet every night and find these financial resources. We want to make that process as easy as possible for them.
Oh, that's great, and great answer.
Yeah, I mean, it's been an interesting time. It's been encouraging to see a lot of these small businesses come up with ways to stay alive during all this. But you know, you also have to be realistic and know that there's a cost that comes with all of this. And sure, these solutions are creative, but they don't erase the monetary burden that a lot of these businesses have. You know, when the example that I mentioned about the cycling studio setting up operations outside, sure, it helped them retain customers, but they also said that they were paying a decent amount of money for this giant tent that they used to cover up their bikes outside. So, you know, it's exciting to see this innovation, but you also have to know that not, things are far from easy for these businesses, even if they've found a way to keep themselves alive during all of this.
Yeah, and I definitely I was looking for a tent outside of our downtown location, and those prices just were
Right.
skyrocketed. And I was like, I just rented a tent, like, for catering last year, same tent, it
Yeah.
went up like 3-4 times the amount that it was when I first got it. But hey, it's business as well. And those tent places, they were getting bombarded, and
Sure.
they had to buy more equipment and try to get more people with tents on the outside, and like it. And
Yeah.
that was one thing that you really did see in the beginning of the pandemic. You just saw a lot of small businesses just shut down. Like, all right, I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to, I don't want to go through the headache. And there's people that came up to me and was like, hey, like, what should I do? And I was like, you got to put something on paper. You
Right.
got to write down pros and cons, and, is it worth it? Some
Yeah.
people are still thriving. Some people is like, nope, not gonna work for me. And that's, a business man or female's, perspective of their business. If it's worth going through the hassle, because it's been a hassle, Sonya.
Yeah. Well,
We
I
talk
mean,
about this all the time.
well, and I think, like, from a consumer perspective, I think that's sort of people who don't know the ins and outs of the industry. It's easy to just say something like, well, why don't you just reopen for to-go meals? But first of all, like, not every entree translates well into to go. It's one thing to package up a hamburger, and it's another thing to translate that into a fine dining experience. It just, and then there's little things like, someone I remember early on was telling me about investing in, like, higher end to go packaging, so it was able to give some sort of elevated food experience. So I do think it's not always, it's a lot easier for some businesses than others, and I fully understand why, like you mentioned, there were places that just shut down entirely. And there's some that still say that they're reopening eventually, but there's plenty of eateries that it's sort of like, I guess they're going to reopen soon. There's a lot that we just don't know their future status right now.
Oh yeah, I got a few buildings around me. I'm always looking at the,
Yeah.
see if somebody, construction workers in there. Like, all right, let's do this. But yeah, people are they're coming back, slowly but surely. I saw some workers in Ella today, which I was very excited to see as I was driving by my neighbors down there. And so we kind of got off on a tangent,
Yeah,
but that was a good one.
yeah.
we're gonna bring it back, okay? I want to know how it was the printed journalism that you do now. Was this your goal coming out of high school? This is what I want to be. I want to be a journalist. Or did it kind of just fall in your lap as you're trying to figure things out into high school, going to college? What was your path get into being the journalist you are today?
Yeah, great. Well, there was only one other career that I seriously considered, and that was being a funeral director. For a while, I really wanted to go to mortuary school and study mortuary science, and I even was accepted to a college in Illinois where I would have specialized in that. But it wasn't, you don't really have, like, mentors in that area in high school. It was sort of a specialized thing. And I considered it for a while, but decided I didn't want to do something that specialized in the event that I ended up not liking that industry. So I ended up going to a very small.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Sonya.
Yeah.
You
Yes.
cannot this rush past this mortuary
Yeah.
director. Why? Why mortuary director? Like,
I
we gotta
know.
get into this. We gotta get to when you get to journal, but we gotta stop right
Sure.
there.
Great.
That's a hot topic. We covered it hot. That's a hot topic. Let's go.
I mean, it's not any sort of goth fascination with death or anything. I recognized that that is a time in people's lives where you need a certain amount of compassion. And one of my primary aspirations in life has always been to be of service to other people. And even in journalism, I try to the best of my ability to acknowledge the human element in the stories that I tell. And I saw qualities within myself that I thought could be valuable in helping people during a time of extreme emotional need. And I just sort of saw a lot of qualities within myself that seemed to be a natural fit for that position. I think that there is potential in any sort of when you're dealing with people that are at a very vulnerable point in an emotionally challenging point of their lives. I think you need to address those conversations delicately and bring a human element beyond business sense into that. And that was sort of what I thought I could bring into that field. And I had a genuine desire to comfort people at the most basic level. But again, it was a very specialized career and not something that I knew enough about to pursue that narrowly. So that was a little tangent. And
that was great. I needed to hear that story. All right, we could up to you changing your mind to go to
yeah.
school.
So I still did end up in the Midwest. I went to a very small school called Ripon College in Wisconsin. And their big claim to fame is that Harrison Ford went there, but he did not graduate. So so it was a very small school, and it just had around 1,000 students. So kind of similar to my high school experience. And I didn't major in journalism. I majored in English. Again, just sort of not wanting to do something incredibly specialized. And also because my school was so small, we had a college newspaper, but there wasn't a formal full-fledged journalism program. So, and I think that was a good route for me. I ended up at that college because they were really looking for out-of-state students. So I got a scholarship simply for being from California. And I ended up, I participated in the speech team in college, which people called it an academic sport. We basically traveled to various other colleges across the country, mainly in the Midwest, on the weekends, and we gave these prepared speeches, and we were graded and scored on these speeches that we gave. So that was sort of like the defining experience of my college days. And then so I didn't really have a transformative moment. I had worked for my high school paper. I worked for my college paper. It just seemed like the natural route for me. I think it's a lot. I actually just spoke at a career day event at St. Francis High School. And one of the things that I acknowledged was there's a lot more positions within journalism than there were when I was coming out of college. I think at that point, you either wanted to be a reporter and maybe eventually an editor, or like a copy editor or designer, someone who aided in producing the paper, or maybe something like a photographer. Right now there are positions where you can, if you work at a big enough paper, you can run that paper's Instagram account, or you can be in charge of developing new products that generate new sources of revenue for newspapers. There's more newspapers have kind of ventured into producing specialized newsletters, so you can do something in conjunction with that. There's a lot and I can't even imagine when today's high school students enter the professional workforce. I imagine the types of jobs that are advertised within the journalism industry will continue to evolve and will be very different than the traditional notions of a reporter who only sits behind a desk and writes stories. You talked, when you talked earlier about seeing my face and people identifying me in person, the idea of a reporter has really evolved, like I said, beyond this mysterious figure that looks at public records and sits at a computer all day. You really are supposed to have more of a brand and a public identity, and there's a lot more things involved in being a reporter and being a journalist right now, like appearing on podcasts, appearing on public radio, being interviewed on TV stations. The notion of what a reporter is has really evolved through the years.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I wanted to kind of go to, because when you started out in, your print, it's a totally different landscape than what it is now.
Yeah.
Like how, like you go into this industry at one way. We get to, what was it, about 2000, maybe a little bit like 96, AOL starts coming out.
Yeah.
And then, 2000 is the Googles and all this stuff. So you go into one place where it's print, you're behind a desk, might call, you might do a couple interviews. How do you stay passionate about the industry that you're in, especially going from sitting behind the desk, maybe, calling somebody, to actually having to be in front of a camera now, or, going out and interviewing people? How do you stay passionate about what you fell in love with to where you are now?
Yeah, I think that's hard. I think when my very first job, I moved back home and worked for the Mountain Democrat newspaper in Placerville, and my first beat was covering the El Dorado irrigation district. So you can imagine how exciting that was. But I did learn a lot.
Uh, okay.
Okay, so uh, early on in my Georgia job, there was this requirement that everybody within my department start a blog. And, some people were better at it than others. That's sort of been the challenge as people navigate this digital world with various levels of expertise and various abilities. You can't assume that everybody in a newsroom is going to be able to start a TikTok account, or that, that, that everybody necessarily needs to. And at the same time, you can't assume that somebody has no value in a newsroom simply because he or she doesn't know how to use Instagram. I think it's kind of finding people's skills and abilities, and kind of in some cases helping them take baby steps, maybe with putting out one tweet a day in which they promote their content. But it can be difficult because even me, someone who is fairly savvy in terms of social media, I'm not going to be on every emerging social network. I kind of have to find where my followers are and meet them there. With the business community, we don't have a lot of like teenage readers, so we don't need to focus necessarily on content that's going to go viral on that end of things. But I think as you said, it can be a little challenging to be in an industry that is evolving so much, and in many cases whose future depends on that evolution. But what I try to remind myself is the core values of what got me interested in this industry in the first place haven't changed. It's still important to tell people's stories. It's still important to tell people what's in public records that they might not be able to navigate themselves. It's still important to tell people when there are issues of significance surrounding a major planned project in town. And even if you're telling those stories differently, the main process of reporting hasn't really changed. It's just keeping up with ways to meet your audience and find them where they are most comfortable.
And what do you say to people that feel that print is dead? And like, again, you're from the print. How do you feel about when people say, oh, everything's on the internet, like no more print, like newspapers, you hardly see them anymore?
I mean,
we're just being real.
Yeah, it's definitely evolving. I mean, I got my dad, who's in his 70s, a tablet for Christmas, and he was very reluctant at first to even use it, and now he's converted he reads all of his news on the tablet. And so I don't think that acknowledging the diminished role of print is a bad thing. I think that and my role has evolved through the years to focus more and on the digital end of things. Like right now, my title is digital editor at the Business Journal. And I think that there are a lot of potential avenues to tell stories differently online. You can do things like inserting reader polls within a story. You can have photos and maps that readers can navigate online. Sometimes just the layout itself can be cleaner. I don't think that the print edition is going to disappear in the near future, but I do think it's important for those people in our industry to recognize the growing role of online presentation and be prepared to adapt to that. You don't want to deliver an experience online that's identical to what people are seeing in print. I think it's good to recognize all of the potential benefits of telling a story online and use those to the best of your ability.
And what's your what's your process of when you're writing a story? Do you have the same process? Do you gotta get yourself psyched up, like before a big game? When they say, hey, we need a story on Nash and Proper, do you...
Yeah, I'll put on my jock jams, dance with my cat for a while, eat a few power bars. I think the process is different for every story. Honestly, it depends how willing people are to speak with us. There are a lot of times in what we do, a big part of what we do is looking at various public records, permit applications, applications filed with different cities and counties. And in the course of reviewing those records, a lot of times we'll find out about a project often before the individual behind that project wants to formally share the information. So that can be a little difficult because you want to be confident in the information that you're relaying to your readers, especially when someone isn't yet ready to talk about the project. I think with the heightened focus on the internet and getting information out quickly, there's this heightened risk of making errors as you're wrapped up in the internet world and reaching as many people as possible as quickly as possible. So that's been a struggle, I think, for a lot of people in this industry, keeping up with the pace of the news cycle while being as accurate as possible.
Okay. And how do you how do you feel about the pressure to remain objective, or are you comfortable with being subjective?
Well, I think it's incredibly difficult. You know, I think you don't want you don't want to get to the point that you have no personality. You know, I think that there's been and it's something that I think is going to evolve. There's and there can be a lot of gray areas, and it's been an interesting conversation that's happened within the field of journalism. You know, I think most people acknowledge that you don't, if you're a journalist, you don't want to be walking around saying, here are my favorite businesses and here's why you should visit business X instead of business Y. But there, in the heightened political climate, there's been a lot of examples in which journalists have sort of entered a gray area. Things like participating in the Women's March. That I think that event highlights a lot of issues that are key to being female in modern society, but that event to some extent was tied to anti-Trump sentiment. So you don't, there are challenges in things like participating in say a women's march or advocating different causes, even when something like that is important to you, because you don't know what certain events are going to turn into, and it's hard to you know, you have to weigh how your advocacy fits in with your role as a journalist.
Has there been anything that you're like, no, I'm not doing that?
I mean, generally, I'm very cautious. Maybe, maybe like over the top cautious. But again, you don't want to get to the point that like you're numb and you have no identity. But it's especially with things being distorted so easily, and you know, you it's so easy to appear in the background of a photo and then have no context, like no sort of footnote explaining why you were there and what you were doing there. And no, you weren't covering it for a story, but no, you weren't trying to make a political statement. I think it's very difficult. And as certain aspects of our country and our dialogue become more divided, it's going to be a struggle that more journalists face. But for now, my priority is staying unbiased, and you know, we do have to clear certain things with our editors, and I expect that will continue to be the policy going forward.
All right. Great. Great. All right. So it's time for our top five, Sonya.
Yes,
I'm
remember,
getting, I know. You told me, and I'm gonna hold you to it, but
okay,
I'm gonna give you some softballs here. All right.
okay, all right,
Okay. All right.
okay.
So Sonya, the first one is top five because you have the finger on the pulse of Sacramento. I need a top five from people outside of Sacramento coming to visit Sonya. What are the top five things that could be places to do in Sacramento? Sonya Sorich, top five people from out of town, what to do in Sacramento.
Okay, I can handle this. I appreciate the softball. Okay, I'm going to begin with the Sacramento's growing beer scene. I think that breweries, that's been something I've covered over the past several years, and it's amazing how much breweries have evolved. They've become really community gathering places more than places like, you know, a dark, shady bar image. And especially if people are coming with kids, I think it's interesting how many breweries have evolved to offer things like even like playgrounds and toys for kids to play with. And I think the brewery is a great starting point if you have family coming in or you are visiting with people of all ages. It's a go-to destination, and also it's amazing how much the brewery scene has expanded to, it's not just Midtown, East Sacramento, downtown. You can find a solid brewery in pretty much every corner of the Sacramento region. So when in doubt, go for beer.
All right.
My number two is going to be something outside, mainly find a local 5K, or if you are in shape, do a half marathon or even a marathon.
All right.
I am an avid runner, and it's been something that's helped me not only meet people, but find a lot of story ideas as well. I was doing a race just the other weekend, and I ran past a storefront that had a coming soon sign on it for a business, which was a location I was entirely unaware of.
All
So
right.
not only did I run 3.1 miles before 9 a.m., I also found a story in the process. But
Nice.
at the very least, Sacramento's running community is really welcoming. It was something I was concerned about when I was moving back here. There was a really avid running scene where I was living in Georgia, and Sacramento welcomed me. There's a lot of training groups. There's informal groups. You can find them easily on Facebook. It's a great way to explore and get outside and maybe see an area within the region that you weren't aware of before. Ready for number three?
Let's do it.
All right, number three, I am going to say, if you don't like running outside, I'm going to encourage you to visit one of our boutique fitness studios. There, the fitness community, like many other industries, was significantly disrupted by COVID-19. I think that a lot of these small fitness studios are still recovering. There's been some great events in the past. There was like an ongoing series of fit crawls that was basically a bar crawl minus the bars, but a crawl between local fitness studios. A lot of our studios are within walking distance of each other. It's a great way to get active, and usually they're also in Midtown within walking distance to a good cocktail spot as well. So it's a good way to justify those extra calories.
There you go.
Number four, I'm going to recommend Sacramento's arts scene. It's been a big part of my life. My dad and I go to music circus shows every summer, and we are disappointed that they've been postponed once again this summer. But it's a great experience. I think it's easy to underestimate the value of the arts here in Sacramento, but there are some very high caliber performances. You can find stages of all sizes, performances of all genres, and they're certainly going to need our help as well after the pandemic. Finally, I'm just gonna say the obvious restaurant. Sure, you can check out Nash and Proper. I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't recommend that one. But I don't think that there is a way to go wrong within Sacramento's growing restaurant scene. I think there are so many groups on Facebook now devoted to the local food and drink scene. It's easy to find a recommendation. Try something local. You won't regret it. You'll have a good story to tell. And again, you'll help our small businesses recover from the pandemic.
Yeah, that was a great top five. Thank you, Sonya. And
Thank you.
the last one, the fifth one, yes, go out to your local restaurant scene. All of them actually are just amazing. Especially, you know, the local breweries, which we have a great relationship with, and fitness studios. I'm gonna have to get that list from you because I need to get up in there. Yeah. Hey, Sonya, this has been great, but we got one more segment. It's called Coming In Hot. We need to get some music for this segment, right? Yeah. So this is I know we're not going political or anything like this, but whatever's on your mind, Sonya, this is the part where you come in hot. So we got Sonya Sorich. It is time to come in hot. What you got, Sonya?
I'm going to come in hot on how to get your news published in the Business Journal. It seems like it should be a straightforward process, but not everybody is familiar with the unofficial rules of pitching a story. So I'm going to give some quick hits about what to do and more importantly, what not to do. First of all, if you are contacting me about getting your news in the Business Journal, please spell my name correctly. It is Sonya. I won't delete your email entirely, but you are definitely starting things off on the wrong foot if I get an Sonja or Sonia email. And something that happens more often than you might expect, sometimes I get dear insert media contact name here. And those are the form letters that usually are from someone outside of the Sacramento area with a story pitch that is being sent out to reporters across the country, and those emails do often get deleted. So that is one little helpful tip. Another thing, if you are pitching a story to the Business Journal, make sure you have actually looked at the Business Journal. We tell stories fairly differently than some other general news outlets might, and there has to be a clear business connection. There are stories that might be very interesting, but if they don't involve a business, particularly a local business, we generally have no interest in pursuing them. Another pet peeve is, if assuming you've crossed those first two hurdles and you are sharing news of significance, make sure you have someone available to answer questions, preferably that day. There are a lot of times that someone sends us an interesting story and they assume that their 2-sentence email is all that we need to know about that story. And then we will send an email saying, can we speak with your CEO or someone who can answer additional questions? And we get, well, sure, that person will be back in the office in 2 weeks. Can I set up a call then? That quickly makes us lose interest, or maybe even worse, from depending on whose perspective we're talking about, we will pursue the story on our own and perhaps find an angle that's slightly different than the one that CEO would like to explore. And then that kind of ties into my fourth point. Just know that the story that you end up seeing in the Business Journal will likely be different than the news release that you send. We do not cut and paste press releases. We generally pursue our own independent reporting, and you can't expect to see that things will be identical to the news release that you send. We usually use that as a starting off point. But again, our stories are not designed to promote individual businesses, rather to tell people what is going on in the business community. And so once you send us that release, we sort of take it from there. And again, I know that things do occasionally get lost in transit, but if you send us 5 follow-up emails and you don't receive a response, chances are we have decided to not move forward with your story, and it's time to move on. Give up on the dream. Hopefully the next pitch will be a little more successful. But it is possible. Just spell my name correctly, have someone available for an interview, and the rest will be history.
Pretty straightforward, but hey, I could get why you have to come in hot on that. That was great. All right, plug all your socials. Plug, if you want to put your personal stuff, it's up to you. If you go ahead and plug Sacramento Business Journal.
Yeah, you can find us SacBiz. We are on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, you can do bizjournals.com/Sacramento to find our website. Subscribe to our morning and afternoon newsletters. I wake up around 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning to put together our morning newsletter. I know it says it's sent from our publisher, David Lichtman, but spoiler alert, I'm actually the one inputting those headlines into the newsletter. So yeah, go ahead, subscribe to our email newsletters. You can find me personally, Sonya Sorich, on social media. Feel free to send me news tips, story ideas. And if you spelled my name incorrectly in the past, let's start over again. I'm willing to give you a second chance.
Hey, this was awesome, Sonya. Thanks for
Thank
coming
you.
on. You can holler at me at Coming In Hot on all social media platforms, at Nash and Proper, at Chef Cease. You can find Coming In Hot with Chef Cease wherever you listen to your podcast, and www.nashandproper.com for those delicious, yummy, mouth-watering chicken sandwiches. We'll see you next week. Thank you. Love you, Sac. Peace.